As you could tell, I have no authority over my board members. No one is listening.
The old people follow orders.
Thank you. Okay, we still need 2 more board members. I'm Braddock. Okay, while waiting for 1 more board member to come in, no, we need 7. We need 7. Doesn't matter. We need 7. So, so we have student leaders in the audience. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stand up for recognition. We're happy to have you here. So introduce yourselves. Yay, thank you. Okay, with that, this work session is in order, and we have 3 members of FPAC, including chairman and vice chair, secretary, and we have another member of FPAC. Chairman.
Okay, so good afternoon. We're going to get going, and hopefully the rest will pop in when they get a chance. So we had a little confusion about how to get this going for you. For those of you that have been around a while, you know that since FPAC was formed, we've been saying that there was a crisis in our schools. And early on, that crisis had to do with the fact that we had not enough capacity for the very fast-growing enrollment that we were experiencing. But now, as enrollments have moderated over the past couple of years, it is now evident that we're experiencing a crisis of a different sort, one related to the impact on school conditions of the lengthy renovation cycle and the consistent underfunding of facilities maintenance. Now, nothing in our report that we're going to talk to you about today reflects on staff's efforts, because we believe they're doing the best that they can in maintaining our facilities, given the limited resources that they have. But we want to bring some things to your attention. We also are well aware that the school board is looking to reduce that 37-year renovation cycle that we're now into by asking for more funds from the county, along with the CIP. Unfortunately, the financial problems with the funding of facilities is not limited to new construction and renovation and other things covered by the CIP. Even with a reduction in the renovation cycle, a lot needs to happen to care for and maintain our facilities until they are renovated again. For purposes of this report, we'll refer to the 37-year renovation cycle, but everything we will discuss applies even if we get down to a 20 or 25-year cycle. And that, as you know, can take quite a while. Okay. So there's the agenda of the topics that we're going to cover. In your board docs, you have the notes for the speaker as well as the slides, and that together forms our complete report. So although the school board policy targets a 20 to 25 year retention cycle, we're now at a point where it's 37 years between renovations at any single school. Given the current funding strategy, coupled with continued growth in the school population, the number of years between renovations will continue to increase. Imagine, if you will, that a child started kindergarten in 1984, at a point where his elementary school, middle school, and high school had all just been through renovation. He goes through 13 years of school, graduates in 1997, goes to college, marries, has a child, and in 2007, that child enters kindergarten in the same school that his father attended. He goes through 13 years of school and graduates in 2020, just as the schools he has attended are up for renovation. That's how long 37 years is. 2 full school generations of a family. During those 37 years, many of the components require maintenance, replacement, and/or upgrades. All of the things on this list are addressed when the school is renovated, but all major systems and components and safety, security, and environmental systems deteriorate over time, and needs for teaching and learning space and technology can evolve rapidly. Would a homeowner expect to buy a new home and do no major maintenance on it for 37 years? Or would one expect to need to replace the heating and air conditioning, carpet, the driveway, the roof, etc.? What would be the expected impact of never doing any maintenance on the major systems? Of course, that would lead to higher repair costs and the need to replace the system earlier than if it had been properly maintained. Lack of regular proactive maintenance causes reduced building service life and a higher total cost of ownership, and it degrades the educational environment and suboptimizes learning outcomes. This chart illustrates the expected life of just some of the categories of the major systems. Please note that life cycle is based on the assumption that regular preventive maintenance will be performed on the systems. Without regular maintenance, the expected life is significantly shorter. During the 37-year period until renovation, each school requires replacement of, as you can see on the chart, the boiler, the chiller, the air conditioning twice, carpet twice, 3 times exterior paint, asphalt parking lot, interior bleachers, and roofs, although they are not shown here, have an expected life of 25 years. Safety and security programs, such as those listed here, also require maintenance, repair, and replacement as they age. Environmental factors should be monitored regularly to ensure optimal learning conditions. And we know that the ed specs are modified every several years to accommodate changes to the teaching and learning spaces, and information technology changes at a pace that is difficult to keep up with. Research shows what we all intuitively know, that school condition impacts teaching and learning. A 2015 Penn State study concludes that a large body of research over the past century has consistently found that school facilities impact teaching and learning in profound ways. Yet state and local policymakers often overlook the impact facilities can play on improving outcomes for both teachers and students. While improving facilities comes at a financial cost, the benefits of such investments often surpass the initial fiscal costs. Policymakers, thus, should focus greater attention on the impacts of facilities and adopt long-term cost-benefit perspective on efforts to improve school facilities. In summary, the studies tell us that improved school conditions result in fewer absences, better performance, higher test scores, lower dropout rates, fewer behavior issues, improved teacher satisfaction and less churn, and newer modern schools maintain and improve property values and attract business to the county. From the board's Ignite strategic plan, we highlight the resource stewardship goal. As you may be aware, the Virginia Property Owners Association Act requires homeowner boards of directors to conduct a reserve study at least every 5 years and to annually ensure that the budget sufficiently funds the reserves needed to repair, replace, and restore the capital components owned by the associations. There is no such explicit requirement for governmental bodies, but elected officials have a fiduciary responsibility to protect and preserve taxpayer capital investments. FCPS manages properties with a current replacement value of $6.2 billion. While these are FCPS assets, the fiduciary responsibility is shared with the County Board of Supervisors. This illustration from the 21st Century Schools Fund shows the recommended budget levels for maintenance and operations as a percentage of the current replacement value. You can see the level of funding and what each of the categories covers from this illustration. So what does our maintenance budget look like? We all recognize that maintenance of facilities is woefully underfunded. In comparing the FCPS maintenance budget to what is recommended by the 21st Century Schools Report, it is clear that there is almost no funding for major maintenance, that is the replacement of systems, as-needed alterations, and reduction of deferred maintenance. And while it appears that maintenance and operations is fairly well funded, the FCPS budget allocates about $63 million of that $167 million to staff and plant operations. The remaining $100 million goes to utilities, custodial staff, and safety and security. This significant underfunding created a deferred backlog which continues to grow from about $99 million in fiscal year 15 to over $142 million in fiscal year 18. This snowball effect will continue with the current investment strategy. Additionally, continued growth in the number and size of our facilities increases the cost of ownership and further widens the gap between available resources and facilities maintenance funding. FCPS requires an increase in the infrastructure replacement funding and FCPS major maintenance allocations to begin to catch up and keep pace with requirements. Underfunding of maintenance and replacement of major systems results in a deterioration of the condition of those assets. Now, FCPS has a comprehensive investment capital plan that's being developed in FTS, and it provides an assessment index to prioritize capital asset renewal projects based on the asset's useful life and criticality. Due to the continued underfunding of our program, the results are staggering. The assets that have been evaluated so far are air conditioning and heating, asphalt, athletic, and major maintenance. Of these, over half of them have been rated as poor, unreliable, or replace. Any of these assets could fail at any time. The total replacement value for the poor, unreliable, and replace categories is approximately $330 million, or 2 full years of all the CIP funds. As part of our discussion with the facilities management staff, FPAC was shown the first draft of a school-by-school status of several of the major systems. We found the reports to be informative and alarming, and made several suggestions to staff for clarifying the information in the report. We encourage the school board to request that staff clarify the presentation and prepare and share these reports with board members. The cumulative effect of underfunding of facilities introduces substantial risks into the learning environment and degrades the ability of FCPS teachers and staff to deliver instructions to students across a spectrum of socioeconomic backgrounds. In addition, FCPS is operating at a higher total cost of ownership due to the cost of emergency repairs and unplanned, earlier than expected replacement of equipment. Specifically, with underinvestment in routine and preventive maintenance, the overall facilities condition degrades more quickly, resulting in more expensive, urgent repairs that have the potential to impact school operations. Examples include loss of power, heat and cooling issues, roof leaks, mold, etc. This simple model uses the life cycle cost analysis based on engineering economics to identify a point in a given machine's life where the cumulative cost of operating and ownership cost is at its minimum. It shows that as a piece of equipment ages, its capital value decreases while its operation and maintenance costs increase. The theoretical optimum service life is the point where cumulative costs are at the minimum. Tools such as this can be used in an asset management program to help reduce the total cost of ownership of FCPS facilities. In addition, the graph shows how O&M costs go up over time and can have a significant impact on the total cost. You may recall from our annual report in July of last year that we presented this overall recommendation with a series of specific recommendations in each area. We recognize that the FCPS budget is severely limited and that there is no magic source of funds. However, as with the capital investment needs, if FCPS can quantify its requirements, a better case can be made to the Board of Supervisors for additional funding. Specifically, we are hoping that FCPS will be able to develop a proactive facilities maintenance program to cover all of the areas. Our recommendations today are centered on a way ahead, and we'll present the recommendations in each of these areas. As mentioned earlier, FPAC saw drafts of the school-by-school assessment of some of the major components. We encourage the school board to request that staff clarify the presentation of the information and prepare and share these reports with board members. When you see what's in some of your schools, you will be amazed and crossing your fingers that nothing happens. And it will keep you up at night. It is that serious when you look at a school-by-school kind of assessment. And when we look at numbers like $330 billion, that's just a big number. But when you look at a specific school and the specific conditions of some of the equipment in those schools, you will see a different picture. So it's really important, we believe, for you to get that information. A comprehensive look at the facilities is needed to include all aspects of facilities. The physical structures and major systems that are part of a comprehensive investment capital plan, as well as environmental factors and safety and security program. These need to be as well understood as the CIP. The next step is to develop a comprehensive asset management plan that includes all aspects of facilities and integrates the maintenance and renovation requirements of the CICP and the CIP and other related programs. So you want to look at everything all together, not one piece separate from the other. Assessments in all areas should be conducted and the needs analyzed and integrated so they can be prioritized for attention and for funding. FCPS staff have begun work on the CICP, and FPAC members are working with them on a comprehensive approach. But developing a plan and conducting assessments take time, money, and personnel, none of which are readily available in today's funding environment. Your help will be needed to allow this work to continue so that staff can provide you with recommendations based on an integrated set of priorities that reflect actual conditions and help ensure equity across all schools, rather than allowing those with the most vocal advocates to receive attention. The comprehensive plan could then be used to identify a full set of requirements for both the CIP and the CICP. As we have mentioned previously, the current CIP presents a plan for using the allocated $155 million per year, rather than identifying all the capital requirements for new construction, for renovation, for additional capacity, and for major maintenance. Currently, the CICP identifies only some of the major maintenance requirements and shortfalls. If the school board must resort to using bond funds for major maintenance items that have a 20 to 25-year useful life, it would significantly impact the renovation and construction projects. A comprehensive plan could be very effective in supporting the case for an increase in funding from the county. Over time, FCPS could adopt a just-in-time budget methodology throughout the facility's life cycle to ensure optimal timing of funding of capital requirements. And it could create a facility's total cost of ownership culture that aligns to industry best practices and considers holistically the entire facility's life cycle. Underfunding and deferring maintenance and decreasing usable building service life is not a strategic approach. The prioritized requirements can be used by the school board to determine which of the three major funding sources should be used: the operating budget, the county transfer for major maintenance, or the bond funds reflected in the CIP. Proposed near-term steps are giving more consideration to safety, security, major maintenance, and environmental needs in deliberations and decisions on the operating budget. Prioritizing the use of the $13 million county transfer for major maintenance, and determining whether some CIP funds should be used for capital components with a 20-year or more expected life. I'd like to clarify one thing right there. When we had the joint meetings with the county on the budget, there was an allocation in the CIP each year of the $13 million for major maintenance items. That didn't reflect our need, just as the rest of the CIP does not reflect our need. It reflected what we felt we should set aside and spend on those. And so when the county looked at that and said, oh, we'll give you a transfer of $13 million to cover that, the sort of expectation I think everyone had was that would take care of our major maintenance funding requirement. And it really isn't the fact at all, as you can see from what we've said today. But what we're suggesting here is that you may need to dip back into those CIP funds, as much as we hate to do that, to fund some long-term capital investments that are not renovations or new construction. Since the current level of funding will never meet the maintenance and operations needs, we all need to advocate with the Board of Supervisors for additional funding. In addition to providing construction funds through the bond and CIP process, additional and separate funding is required to maintain our facilities. The Board of Supervisors shares responsibility for the health and safety of our children, as well as the fiduciary responsibility for capital investments. In addition to asking the questions about county renovation cycles and funding of major maintenance on county buildings, we could also ask Mr. Moon's question from the CIP work session. How many county employees are housed in trailers? Which leads to a question. Are we treating our children with less regard to their safety, security, environmental, and physical facility conditions than we do our adults who work for the county? And we need to raise community awareness that additional funding is required if we are to maintain our schools and our reputation as a top-tier school district. In conclusion, we know that there's a huge amount of risk in major systems that must be mitigated sooner rather than later. The current resourcing levels for the portfolio appear unsustainable in the long term. An actionable plan with adequate resourcing will protect the taxpayers' investment, align with FCPS' strategic goal of resource stewardship, and enable better student outcomes. The practice of consistently accepting risk in our facilities is inadequate to deal with current and future challenges. Continued underfunding of facilities maintenance jeopardizes the investment we have made in renovations. More importantly, it negatively impacts the health, safety, and educational achievement of our children and creates a bow wave of future costs to return assets to proper condition. Our purpose today is to bring these issues to light for discussion and action FCPS staff is and has been doing a great job of keeping things running as smoothly as possible, in spite of funding cuts, staffing restrictions, etc. And part of the reason that this is not an issue on everyone's mind is that things look like they are running smoothly and all is well. FPAC wants to ensure that current and future generations of students are offered the best public facilities that FCPS can provide. We need tomorrow's classroom today, not the classroom from 37 years ago. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss this important topic with you, and we'll be happy to respond to questions.
Okay, I have Mr. McAlvin as the first one on the list. Let me see whether I can. I have Strauss, Corbett Sanders. Anybody else? Okay, I'll check. So let me ask you a couple of simple questions first. McLaughlin, page 12 of the slide.
12?
12, 1, 2, yes. That's 19?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. I guess I have a narrative what you have from the bold doc. This is something that I need to have a better understanding of, numbers wise. The FCPS CLV is estimated to be 6.2 billion, but the funding from FCPS and county sources total 0.4%. So 0.4% will be about 25 billion.
I'm not doing the math in my
By
head.
1% will be about 62, 25 million. So where is that 25 million from? I'm among other numbers on that page, I was unable to come up with that 25.
Right. And that's why I didn't say it when I was speaking. We have 23 plus 1. And
23
there's a rounding error in
plus
there somewhere.
1.
So I think that's where your 25 million is. It's not talking about the O&M piece.
Okay. Plus 1. So that is 0.4%. Do you know how that is compared to county size, county government?
No, we don't.
Okay. Is that something maybe Mr. Plattenberg? Is that kind of information you have access to?
No, sir. If you recall, when the Infrastructure Finance Committee, when we worked with them, we asked for comparative data sets so we could actually do some kind of analysis. And I think kind of the best we got, including our square foot costs, et cetera. I think the only information we could get was what they had on their website. We can ask again, certainly. I'll be happy to do that.
Okay, I'll tell you part of my next step then. Okay, with that, Mr. McAlvin.
Thank you, Mr. Moon, for your introduction at this session and all the sessions. I would first like to thank the four of you for your service over the years. I mean, you are the examples of what makes this such an impressive committee. You always bring us such impressive reports. I know all of us appreciate that. The first thing I wanted to bring up was the 13 million. My understanding at the time, and Mr. Plattenberg can correct me, but I thought that was designated specifically for roof maintenance. Was that the case?
No, sir. It was really to replace the items that had previously been included in the bond referendum, which was major maintenance. There was a technological component to it, and there was also like asphalt.
Okay, got it. So it was for major maintenance. Okay. So you talked about the school-by-school assessment. Do you have a sense of what that would cost us, and do you envision doing this separate from the process that we would undertake anytime we revise the queue? And go through that review of each school?
That's where an integrated look at all of this stuff is important. And I can't tell you what it would cost, except that it costs a lot. And I think that what our purpose is to get you to provide some resources for staff to get going on some of this and give you that kind of feedback so you know what it would take. How much of what kind of assessment can they do for what dollar threshold? They're doing some now, but they want to do more, and they know that more is needed. So rather than quantify it, I'm just bringing it to your awareness, and then let staff answer the particular questions about what different levels of assessment would cost.
But you would envision that is separate from the Q process, right? Because I'm thinking that could be one way of doing this simultaneously and save costs. Right?
It could be done as part of that. I think there's the assessment that we're talking about is maybe more in-depth than what they do for the Q assessment, but you could certainly combine the two as you have the engineers going through the buildings for that.
Okay.
If I may,
yeah.
there's also a part of the queue that includes the ability to provide the current instructional piece and not just the physical plan. I think that's what was being discussed.
Sure. Okay, great. Then I think the last question I have for you is, it's not related to anything you talked about today, and because we rarely get to see you, one of the things that has been brought up in recent discussions at this table has been a more serious look at the nuclear option. So I wanted to get your thoughts on where FPAC is on this. I know, having attended FPAC meetings in the past, that there are certain members of FPAC that certainly support that option. I just wanted to get a sense where you guys currently are on that issue.
A week from Saturday, the 24th, we have our retreat for this year. And that's one of our areas of investigation and discussion for FPAC, is to look at at that as part of the long-term comprehensive planning that needs to be done for the county schools. So I think it's gaining more and more support in FPAC. The question would be, how do we frame it up and present it so that there's a way ahead, instead of just, blowing the whole thing up as a nuclear option? But what are the potential impacts of that? Those kinds of things.
And then just last, I think as a next step, perhaps, if we're doing that for you, I think if you could bring back to the board the next time you present to us your thoughts on that come out of the retreat.
That'd be part of our annual
helpful.
report.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Strauss, to be followed by Ms. Colbert-Sanders.
Okay, I want to make sure that I understand the terminology. The comprehensive investment capital plan would include, tell me again exactly what that would include and what that is different than the CIP.
Okay, so right now there appear to be several things going on.
Mm-hmm.
You have the CIP that looks at the renovation and that part of it.
Right.
Then in the capital investment plan that's being worked on in the maintenance area of FTS,
Right.
it's about what are our long-term maintenance needs and what are our short-term immediate needs and what are our assessments of the facilities.
Right, and that's it. And just because my understanding, we know how old the boilers are. I mean, we know the life cycle. Right. I mean, we've always we catalog all this. We know the state of the basic systems in every school, and many of them should be replaced. But we know them, and we keep a log so that we know where we are. Okay.
So it's bringing that data together into a capital asset program plan.
So it would marry the two together with the CIP. So it would be a comprehensive plan that would look at system replacement outside of renovation cycles, which are way behind, and all the trailers and all the rest.
But also include safety, security, and environmental concerns. And some of those are managed as separate programs.
Right,
And what
I see
we're
what you
saying
mean.
is bring it all
I
together.
see, so that you would have a comprehensive, all right.
Right.
I have a better idea. Okay. And I guess the question, what is needed in order to bring that together? I imagine it's manpower and woman power. People power.
People power and money and time. All
Right,
the
but
things we're
that's what
short
it
on.
is. It would be employees who could actually catalog that and then figure out where we're going forward on that. Right, and of course you do know that we have asked for a considerable increase in CIP money.
Exactly. And to come back to you and say, that's great, but we also need a whole bunch of maintenance money. I think it's important for you to understand the whole picture.
Right, and as we have, in the years past, when we run out of money, one of the first places where we steal money is out of maintenance, because on a year-by-year basis, if you can still keep it going and the building works, you'd rather buy the teacher than replace the system. I know, and that's always a dangerous sort of Russian roulette, and we play that all the time. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Ms. Corbett Sanders, followed by Ms. Palchik.
Thank you. And I echo my colleagues' comments on the important work that you all do, because you really are just an incredible advisory committee that I know that I value sitting down with you at least twice a year just to hear about trends and advice on how we could be doing things better. As a matter of fact, as a result of one of those conversations, when we talked about the adoption, or when we adopted the capital improvement plan, I requested that in the future we actually have a section on major maintenance. And so what you're saying now is that is great, but it's not sufficient, that we should be addressing more than just maintenance, major maintenance, but the safety and security piece as well. And so what would be really helpful from you all, and I don't know if it's possible by the year-end meeting, or it's something that staff should do, is to have some sort of rough outline of what an appendix to a future capital improvement program would be to address not only major maintenance, but other categories, and kind of almost like an annotated outline.
We can take a stab at that. What I would suggest we think about is to turn it around a little differently and think about what's the big picture of the whole capital asset investment program. The CIP is a piece of that,
Exactly.
as opposed to the program being a piece of the CIP or an add-on. So ideally, we would have a comprehensive plan, and we would say, this is what's covered in the CIP, this is what's the maintenance, this is how we're going to deal with safety, security, environment. And all of the funding needed for that is streaming in a certain way. So we're working right now with staff to look at what an asset management program overall should be. So we should have some kind of a outline or piece parts for that we could bring back in July or June when we do our annual report.
I think that would be very helpful. I mean, frankly, the reason I looked at my earlier suggestion of hooking it onto the CIP is because the CIP is the mechanism that this body informs the Board of Supervisors of our needs in capital investment. And so that's why I had initially thought that way. So any recommendations would be greatly appreciated. Secondly, am I correct that your best practice chart, if I add up everything that the 21st Century Schools report recommends, we would be spending $434 million a year, correct?
That sounds about right.
And we're only spending $194 million in investments now? Is that correct? So that would be something that I would urge all of my colleagues when they talk with their colleagues on the Board of Supervisors to let them know that there is that big of a delta, and it would be worth knowing what the how the county complies with the 21st century. I'm sure they have 21st century government buildings recommendations, and how close they are to adhering to those recommendations.
Yes, and I think the difficulty with the county is getting straightforward answers that are limited to their buildings. Because
Right.
as soon as they throw in sidewalks and parks and other stuff into their capital plan, it becomes all muddled. So the questions that we put at the end of this briefing that said ask the county about these things, it's about what are you doing with your buildings? What is their renovation cycle? And what is their maintenance funding?
Right. Excellent. Thank you. And then just one last question. I know you have your FPAC retreat on the 24th. I know people come to it. Are you expecting that it will be a broader audience than just the FPAC members?
We always welcome the public, and it's publicly announced. We typically don't get a lot of people that come and talk to us at that time, but if they do, we have a time on our agenda to hear the community.
Excellent. And I apologize. The 11 million that we took 11 million out of our budget this year that we proposed to the Board of Supervisors. It would be helpful, and we don't need to have it here, but where do you think that 11 million is going to come out of?
I don't believe it's going to be coming out of, the question is, do you think it's going to be coming out of major maintenance or capital funds? I don't believe it's coming out of those arenas. The reference that Ms. Strauss referred to was that we had over $2 million that had been cut. I think it was approximately 7 or 8 years ago in our overcrowding account. And we also had $3 million that was cut for those exact reasons you talked about in our major maintenance account. And over 10 years, so you know that's a $30 million cut over time when it's not incrementally replenished. And those are all very good statements. That's, in fact, one of the reasons why when I came back here, I started the whole capital asset program. We did get our major systems to where we now know the life cycle. We've identified and tagged with IDs on every single one of them that we have, HVACs, rooftop units, et cetera. But to the point of what was brought up, it is not a comprehensive because there's so many motors, fans, blades, et cetera, that go to all our different systems. And that's what they were referring to. But yeah, I don't believe any of the money in finance was recommended cut out of major maintenance any further. We're pretty much down through the marrow.
Thank you. I have a Ms. Pelchik to be followed by Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, FPAC, and Mr. Plantenberg and your team for everything you do with limited funding. I learned this year that Horace Mann fought for public education after visiting every single school building in Massachusetts and seeing the inequities there. And so although we sometimes overlook your department, it is so critical, and I appreciate the view that you bring to it. I just have one minor thing, obviously supporting us getting the funding we need for this. I have heard quite often, and I'm sure Ms. Evans has as well, about the existing or evident inequities in our school buildings. And so I know you did, you've recommended a school-by-school assessment. I would support that. I don't know in what way we could bring that forward, or we could work with staff to be able to show that. But as we do the CIP, I especially have schools and communities that are asking even for a pyramid level assessment and reporting out of what is happening. So I don't know how that could happen, but if there's a way, kind of like our equity dashboard, that we could show school-by-school assessments, I think in a county this large, especially when we talk about advocacy from our communities, I hear often that without knowing how it impacts their school and their community, it's hard for them to have that conversation. So I don't have a way of what it should look like, but anything we could do for next steps would be helpful. Thank you again.
Mrs. McLaughlin.
I too also appreciate the great work you guys continue to produce and the collaboration that you have developed with Jeff Plattenberg's office. It's one incredible example of the fact that when you have a part-time school board in charge of a $3 billion annual budget, and as you noted, is it $6 billion in capital infrastructure? This is a massive enterprise, and your subject matter expertise that you selflessly bring to this work has been incredible for us. I really appreciate that what you're basically saying to us is finally, all right, we can keep wringing our hands, or we have to be really intentional with a roadmap going forward. So I appreciate the recommendations you've brought forward. I fully support them. Certainly welcome Dr. Brabrand and Mr. Plattenberg, if there's anything you want to add about the recommendations here, any concerns in fulfilling it, but I think it's important. And I also appreciate Ms. Corbett Sanders bringing up the fact that we have to be intentional with our message. And so when you're talking about, I think you said over 400 million versus 190. Yeah, so that's something that all 12 of us should be singing from the same sheet of music, to draw an analogy that Mr. Moon will enjoy. And so, but we can't do that if we're not being intentional from the board level. So Dr. Brabrand, that's going to be one of my next step asks, is that based on the recommendation that's coming from our FPAC, based on where the board is, which is that we need to elevate this conversation, this very public conversation to the next level, then we have to bring our A game. And part of that is having effective communication points to the supervisors and to the community. And again, so much of the great work you do, it's data driven. So it's not hysterics, it's not Chicken Little, it's not whining because we just want them to give us more money. This is very real. And much of the county, and I would also suggest that the business community are going to care very deeply, wanting to know how we are as a flagship school system. So I look forward to hearing more from my other colleagues on this, but I, again, just appreciate what you've presented here today and want to be an effective elected official taking this information forward.
Thank you. I have Mr. Colfax to be followed by Ms. Evans.
Thank you. My question has been answered, so I will just leave with the similar comments that my colleagues have had. Thank you so much for your time. Ms. McLaughlin said it so well that we are a part-time board that rely heavily on groups, like you to bring us this data forward. It is astounding. Thank you for putting another thing on my list to keep me up at night. And also just another thing that really is keeping me up at night, in addition, that falls under your purview, is what we're talking about. Mr. McElvain talked about the nuclear option, and I manage the CIP section and work with staff and heard about your your talks, not your recommendations yet, but conversations that you've been having and hearing. And I think the way we're doing it now is not the most productive way. This constant looking at this and that and the way things were cut out years ago are not the way. And we have new schools on the horizon, and what is best to do that, and new schools in one end of the county and the other, and the ripple effects they're having. So I will be very interested to hear your year-end report, what other communities that have chosen to do this, what they found out, what are the best practices out there, even going so far, are there organizations that can help us do this in conjunction with your team, facilities, our board. So thank you.
Ms. Evans is the last one on my list.
I also want to thank you for laying this out so clearly for us. This is clearly an ongoing issue that we've been dealing with and fighting for years, and it's extremely frustrating that we don't have the funds to do what we would like to do, either on major maintenance or on renovations. So it's great to see it laid out here. Particularly, I appreciate you outlining the impact that a renovated school has on student performance versus, a facility that is falling apart. So, that's an important point that we need to keep making. It's not just about kind of a nice to have, but it really does impact student performance. And it's something that we can't forget, and that we need to make sure that the Board of Supervisors and others understand that as well when they consider whether they will respond to our request for more bond money. I did want to point out one thing. I'm glad that you looked at the various different things that the parts that need to be refurbished on a regular basis, and 37 years is not the timeline. We do on fire protection. I will mention that we still have 3 schools without a sprinkler system, and you know what one of them is. That's something that we really do need to fix. So I couldn't let that go without pointing out that we still have 3 of our approximately 200 schools without that very important fire protection. And we, it's going to be a while, it's going to be years before those 3 schools are renovated. And lastly, we'll point out that the last time we had, I think it was Ms. Palchuk who wanted to have another assessment. The current renovation queue was created in 2008. Before, I think there were only 2 members of this board who were on the board in 2008. So that gives you some indication of just how long it's been. And we've been crawling through the renovation queue, and even so, we're not anywhere near the end. So in terms of reassessing, I think it would be good to reassess, but we've got to get through this renovation queue. It's been a decade, and we're still, barely see the end on the horizon. So mainly, I just wanted to thank you for your great work. You make very, very important points. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any go back? Next. Oh.
Really, really quickly. No, just super quick. You mentioned in your report that the information you received was quite shocking and concerning, and there was referencing to, safety concerns and all of that. I'm not sure if I missed it, but is that report somewhere in a link that we as board members will see, or is that something that was provided to all of you that we should then as a next step have available to the board to see? Or could you just briefly touch on that?
School by school assessment report. That's, as far as I know, is still in draft form. The maintenance folks in the system brought it to FPAC when they talked to us about their needs and requirements and said, here's some data. And when we looked at those schools that were in our individual districts, we were like, oh my gosh,
okay,
this is really, but the way the data was laid out was raised a lot of questions. And after we sort of clarified with the staff what the questions are and how this is presented, the idea was take that back and make sure the presentation doesn't misalarm or misinform people when they look at the data, and then get it to the respective school board members so you can start to see what the conditions are. And again, it only addresses the items that have already been assessed. So what we're suggesting is that you ask staff to have some time, give them the time and resources they need to fix those reports so that they're accurate for your review, and then provide them to you.
Okay, so Mr. Moon, I definitely want to make sure that's as a next step.
Okay, we have Dan and Charlie. You want to add anything?
Charlie has something.
Charlie has something.
Hey, thanks, Charles Hookey, from Braddock District. Yay, Braddock. Mr. McElveen mentioned first this nuclear option, and for the benefit of the home audience or whoever's watching that may not be up to speed on what that is.
It's not North Korean's nuclear weapon.
Exactly. That's a term that one of the original members of FPAC coined as a solution to the myriad puzzle of school boundaries that we have, islands and peninsulas and split feeders and some craziness that all has good reason when you go back and look as to why it happened that way. But is it time to face that music and on a long-term plan come up with a different, better, more equitable solution to how we assign students to school facilities?
So it would basically allow us to redraw all the boundaries.
Countywide
For the
boundary
county.
change. Simply, countywide boundary
Countywide,
change.
right.
Simply, countywide. Just 200 squares. Okay, thank you. So with that, next steps. Okay, let's read all of those. Okay, I don't need my first bullet anymore. I can delete mine.
So I didn't ask for that, but I'd be happy to advocate for that. But mine was just to speak about the nuclear option in the FPAC's annual report to the board.
Countywide boundary change.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it a change plus a change in process, is my understanding? No.
That's in.
Yes, don't put, yes. Incorporate it.
What I don't know is it's incorporate, it would be develop recommended approaches.
Right.
No, I mean, I don't think it's, I think it's just, look, I think share ideas on countywide boundary change option.
That might be.
Yes, thank
Share.
you.
There you
Since, hold on a second.
I don't want it to look like
Hold
we're
on a second.
tasking.
This is Mr. McElveen's request, so let him have a chance to clarify what he wants, okay?
I don't think it
This
looks-
is going to be on the front page, headline, so see, let him take all the blame, all right?
Yeah, that's why I don't want to say develop recommended approaches. I just wanted to share ideas with the board on.
No, she's even taking a
potential
picture.
Oh, good.
I'm teasing.
No.
Share ideas. Oh my goodness. Okay. On yes, perfect.
Yes, give him.
Share ideas on potential countywide boundary change. Yeah. Okay. No. I'm fine with that as it is. No.
Okay, so share ideas on potential countywide boundary changes in next FPAC report. Okay, those supporting the raise your hand.
Ideas on potential approaches to accounting.
Not an approach?
Huh? No, it doesn't say approach. I'm
Can
saying
we add approach?
No, because look, I just want ideas. They might come back to us and say no, in which case we don't need their ideas, right? Just share ideas.
Okay. That's if. Okay, raise your hand if you want to support that ideas being incorporated in the next report. Okay, 1, 2, 3 for those opposing. Okay, that goes down on a tie vote. Okay. So they abstained.
But I would just say that, you know, since that's. Can I speak?
Okay, go ahead.
I would assume that FPAC will still be talking about that at your retreat. You
Yes.
just won't be reporting to the board.
It's not our next step.
Yes.
Okay.
They can-
Okay, the next one is Corbett Sanders.
share rough
It would
outline for future-
provide a rough outline of an expanded,
It's the
it's
CICP.
on what the CICP,
Yeah.
of an expanded CICP.
Yes.
Thank you. Would include, and you can take out future capital improvement needs, because that,
Okay, those are in support of that. Thank you guys for coming. Don't talk about nuclear options when you go back to school. All right, raise your hand if you can support that. Okay, the next one, Ms. Pelchik.
Yeah, I no longer have my notes, but it was based on the recommendation
comprehensive.
So that was the school-by-school assessment.
assessment, right,
Assessment.
not basis, right. Not needs, but assessment.
And
If we
I'm-
have that available, right, what
No,
is,
thank you for that, because as they reported out, they were saying to do it to the level of granularity that would be really the proper way to be as comprehensive as was recommended, it would take a huge investment. That being said, I think what we can do is come back with what it would take to do it at this level, where we are, and the difference between, so that there can be some lens on or some view of what could the next steps be.
Right, or if there's an alternate
Right.
plan that is feasible. Okay, thank you. We're asking for staff to bring us what.
An approach for an assessment on a school-by-school basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
An
so
approach.
direct staff to putting us a step-by-step approach. Could you complete the sentence? Someone?
An approach to capital assessment on a school-by-school basis.
Okay?
To capital assessment.
Okay, with that, those who can support that, raise your hand. Okay. The next one is Mrs. McLaughlin.
Yeah, it's not exactly what I was saying. I would edit it that where it says provide effective communication points for board members to discuss the capital or the comprehensive, because really what we're talking about now is comprehensive.
CICP.
Yeah, to discuss the CICP. With the Board of Supervisors.
We don't have a CICP yet.
Well, I know that,
Operational, it's on the maintenance, the operations and maintenance, the increased operation and maintenance funds we need. That's what we're
yes,
looking for.
because we were talking about the 434 million versus the 194 million. And those are things that we should be having that kind of information at our fingertips and sharing with the public and sharing with the Board of Supervisors.
And it is a continuation of what you've requested before as a part of the IFC. The county does incorporate on a grading system, A, B, C, D, F, for all facilities. So there is part of the one Fairfax like you did with the budget. I see an opportunity here for that.
That's a good idea.
So take out the CICP.
Okay, and just with the Board of Supervisors.
Right, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Funding maintenance funds needed. I would say funding maintenance needs. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, those who can support it, raise your hand, please. Okay. The last one is Mrs. McLaughlin again.
Yeah, again, I wasn't talking about the FPAC report. We all have that. It was about the school-by-school assessment that was a draft report that FPAC got to see that shows some troubling news. So,
Okay, if it is- if
Mr.
it is
Plattenberg,
an-
can you clarify what that draft report is?
Yeah,
that-
it's my asset management program that I developed. So I have the information. We've given it to the school board in the past in terms of the large dollar amount, but we haven't broken it out in terms of so many boiler repairs at this school and so forth. And I think that's what Karen was referring to, Kathy Hogan was referring to about this sobering data that's in there.
Correct. And so that's,
be happy
that sobering data, Dahlia, I need to ask you a question. Where your second bullet point says that bring to the board an approach to the capital assessment on a school-by-school basis, is she asking for something different than what I'm asking for, or are they the same?
That's a good question, because once you start saying CP, which is, we in OFM came up with that, it really is what is out there in terms of our capital asset plan.
So
They could be
it's
kind of
possible we could
commingled.
combine mine with Dahlia's, because I think she was saying, no, keep them separate.
I think what I could do to answer that is to not only have yours, but also the way forward, which is, what do you have now, and what would the ultimate be, and what are the paths in between?
Yeah, because I thought Dahlia's wanting the approach, Mine was, we want to see what the alarming data is first. So we could just, I think
And
we
it's
both.
not- It's not asset management, it's asset assessment. So it's
Assessment,
the
yeah.
assessment that's been
The-
done
the
on the
yeah.
assets already.
Asset assessment report, right?
So, Mr. Plattenberg, if you have something in a draft form, is that something you can share with the board members, or that's a
As-
working document of a staff and not to be shared?
It is something we could share. We don't have any problem with it. We've developed it, and we've given you the dollar amount in our capital talks. If you'll recall, the school board has requested more transparency throughout the evolution of our capital improvement program document to include more of this data, to include the major maintenance data, and it's perfectly aligned with these requests.
So that's just something you already have.
Yes, sir.
So, Mrs. McLaughlin, does that suffice your need?
Yeah, I mean, I just thought whatever FPAC saw, it would be good for
Right,
us to
that's
see.
he's willing
So,
to share.
Yeah, if he's
something,
willing to
okay.
share it in whatever capacity you think is appropriate, that's great.
Okay. So with that understanding, raise your hand if you can support that. Okay. Thank you so much. Anything else that has not been posted? If not, this work session is adjourned. I want to thank again Karen, Dan, and Charlie. Thank you. Oh.